Okay, record on this computer. Hello and welcome to the first Beyond Social Media show of 2021. We finally made it. And we are the podcast for marketing, advertising, public relations, and digital communicators. This is episode 333, I believe. And we are changing up our format a little bit this time around. We are going to add one interview a month with a prominent marketing person who can share advice with us. But we're going to begin by twice a month, and we're going to do our regular format once a month. We're going to do an interview every other week, and we're going to kick this off by interviewing each other. So today I have the honor of interviewing my longtime co-host and dear friend, David Erickson. David and I have been doing this show since 2013. We have never met in person in real life, but we see each other every week on Zoom. So welcome, Dave. I'm really happy to have this chance to interview you. And I think that it's about time we learn a little bit about how we got here. So,
Thanks. I'm delighted to be on your podcast, BL.
so okay, let's kick this off. First of all, what was the first job you ever had in your life?
My first job, well, I guess I could say delivering newspapers. And for those who are too young to understand, there was a time when newspapers came on actual print and they hired little kids to deliver the newspapers door to door to people who subscribed to the newspapers. That was my first actual job. The second job I had that was more of a real job was I worked at a manufacturing plant that made tofu. And so, they made tofu. And my job was to take the tofu out of this ice cold water and put it in the container and put it on a conveyor belt.
Oh, that's so funny.
To seal the container. And it was absolutely the worst job I've ever had in my life.
Oh my God, that reminds me of the I Love Lucy episode where they worked in the chocolate factory. What was your first job? What did you study in college?
I studied English. I actually came into college thinking I would be a music major, and I've never learned how to read music, so that was I quickly came to the realization that this would be way too hard for me. Starting from ground zero as a music major, so I switched to art. And I essentially got without officially getting it, I got what would have amounted to an art minor. And then I switched to English and became an English major and graduated with BA in English.
What was your first job in communications and how did you get it?
Let's see. So while I was in college, I managed a restaurant and handled the advertising for that restaurant. So that could be considered a communications. There's an aspect of communications. I also worked for the Cedar Rapids Gazette immediately out of college, and for a marketing firm called Epley Communications, where we did surveys. We did open-ended and closed question surveys for companies. And those were my two jobs right out of college.
So which of your jobs contributed the most to your success in communications after that?
Yeah, so I went from there to, I learned what surveys were like from Epley. I learned about the news business from working at the newspaper. I learned about ad sales from the newspaper. I moved to Minnesota after working there and worked at Dayton Hudson Corporation, which is now Target, in their corporate department, doing a weird little department called Tracks, where it was kind of a combination of HR and government relations. But I was basically a phone operator. I was interviewing people on the phone to find out whether they would qualify the company for a tax credit. Essentially, new hires, I'd talk to them, ask them a bunch of questions to find out whether they would qualify for a tax credit for hiring them. It was basically a government program to encourage low-income people getting jobs, essentially. And that actually was very good training for learning how to use your voice to draw information out of people. So it was basically, it contributed to what we do right now.
Certainly must
Being able to,
have.
yeah.
So you've been an independent contractor for quite a while, but how did you start in the agency business?
Yeah. So in that job that I just talked about, I started. I became fascinated with the internet, 1994 or so, and taught myself HTML. Like, this is something I wanted to learn about, so I learned how to code HTML and started building websites. And from that, about a year later, I started doing freelance website design. And about a year later, I started a consultancy. So I started out pretty much as an independent contractor, did my consultancy for about 10 years, then joined a couple of PR shops, and then and now I'm an independent consultant again. So it was good to have that experience beforehand, so I can use it now.
What kind of clients do you work with these days?
It runs the gamut. Got an e-commerce client, coffee shop. I worked ag. I got healthcare. I mean, it kind of runs the gamut depending upon what is needed.
And so, what kind of services do you provide to your clients? I know you have a million of them, but I mean, what are the things that are most likely to be needed by clients these days?
Well, I mean, so my career kind of paralleled the rise of the internet. So as I said, I started building website design back when you actually hand coded websites. From there, I learned email. So I started doing email marketing, learning about email, and social media came up, and I learned how to do social media marketing, video, now audio, podcasting, et cetera, et cetera. So along the way, I've kind of learned to master each basic communications channel. These days, there's a great deal of, so my more corporate clients there's a lot of research and strategy. They've got in-house people that do the execution and stuff, or they're hiring a different agency to do the execution. But yeah, a lot of kind of strategy upfront, or landscape communications, competitor communication, research, I mean, or reviewing things after the fact to see what went right, what went wrong, insights from that. That's part of the more corporate, higher, bigger clients. And then there's advertising, social advertising, search advertising, website design. I'm producing some podcasts, so just sort of depending on what
Don't
comes through
forget
the door.
analytics. Don't forget
Analytics, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you basically have been self-taught all along the way, which is, there is no school to go to for most of this stuff.
That's right, but I mean, that's what I love about what we do. It's always changing. There's always a fascinating new thing. If it's a new client and a new industry that I don't know about, there's a huge learning opportunity there that I get to learn about something I didn't know before. If it's a new technology that I need to tackle and stuff, that's another. I mean, that's what drives me, is learning new stuff all the time.
So what's the most challenging client situation you have ever worked on?
Well, I mean, all of them are challenging in their own way. Whether it's, I mean, sometimes you have difficult clients. Won't lie, it happens. And so that's just a, client relation. One of the things that I tell young people coming into communications, into advertising or public relations or strategic communications or whatever, is congratulations. Now 99% of your best ideas will not get implemented.
But isn't
You can
that
have
true?
all these brilliant creative ideas that you know will work and pitch them, and clients will say, oh, that's great, that's great, that's great, and then it never happens.
We
So
can't do that. Oh no, we can't do that. No, I don't think
yeah,
so.
yeah.
But tell me a time when one of your exciting ideas, happened when you were able to do one of the exciting things you wanted to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, so one was a client who had basically online criticism. It was early on, before when social media was new, and so we looked at it as a opportunity rather than freaking out about it. So we responded with by rather than trying to deal with the criticism directly, turning a policy around and changing the policy and inviting those critics to engage with us. And it was basically a content development. It was a contest, a content contest that turned a bunch of critics into people who were raving about the company. Because they changed their policy, they listened to their customers, and they ended up with all these great creative visual assets, photography and stuff that they could use in their own marketing. So that was you kind of knew that would happen, but you don't know until you try it, and it worked out the way you thought it would. That's really satisfying.
That is satisfying, and you brought that kind of concept along into work that you've done along the way. And didn't you have a political aspect of your career at some point? What was that
That's
about?
Yeah, that's actually how I got interested in this line of work. In 1994, Minnesota had a gubernatorial contest, and the candidates, I read in the newspaper, in the Star Tribune, the candidates were going to be holding a debate via email. So it was the first ever political debate held via email. And that just for some reason, like, oh my God, I was following politics. I was getting into politics at the time. I was kind of engaged in local party politics, and then I'm
Totally
like, oh yeah,
before social media.
yeah, yeah. And so I'm like, I need to learn this. So I did, and from there, then a couple of years later, I started a website, mnpolitics.com. I still have the domain; nothing's there though. That we basically started covering Minnesota politics on there. So it was the first online outlet that covered Minnesota politics. It was more opinion than reporting. We did break some stories, but 1998 was the year that Jesse Ventura was elected governor of Minnesota as an independent. It was huge national press. A couple of years later, Senator Wellstone was killed in a plane crash while he was campaigning towards the end of the campaign, and that again was national press. And from there, people were calling, and like MSNBC and stuff. I was on TV commenting about politics and everything.
That's
So it was,
great. That's really
yeah.
great. So how do you keep up with trends in marketing? What is it that you do to make sure that you're ahead of the curve?
I think it's really tough these days because I mean, everybody who's going into digital marketing these days is picking a specialty. Essentially, if you're young, you're probably picking out one aspect of digital marketing and going that route. Maybe it's search engine advertising or digital PR, whatever it is, and it's easier to do that. It's by necessity because there's just too much information to stay on top of. I try to stay on top of it by basically I've got a system. I use Feedly. I put in a bunch of publications into Feedly, and I follow the stories there. I skim every day. I post to my Twitter account, which is kind of disciplined for me to staying on top of stuff. So I post stories basically every half hour to my Twitter account that have to
Astounding
do with
to me
digital
that you do
marketing.
that. Yeah.
But that's how I do it. But I mean, it's not very deep, right? The only time I go really deep is when either we're going to be talking about something on the podcast. That's another aspect of staying on top of this. This podcast is discipline for you and I have talked about this discipline for staying on top of our of what's going on in our field. But but most of the sharing the stuff is pretty much headlines and descriptions, unless I've got this podcast or there's a client that I need to learn stuff about, right? So
what do you make sure you read every day?
let's see. I don't have a publication that I read every day. I follow some publications closer than others. Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal for search engine marketing, Marketing Land, Vox, all the the
TechCrunch.
major mainstream media to TechCrunch. But yeah, there's not one that I follow specifically unless I need to get caught up on, if I, Social Media Examiner. There's some, I need to get caught up real quick on some Facebook stuff that I haven't been paying attention to recently. I'll turn to one of those outlets to get in the deeper dive. But there's, yeah.
So is there something you wish you could learn instantly?
Hell yes. A lot of things.
Like what?
How to read music. Or languages. I mean, music basically is another language, but yeah, I mean, I would love to learn another language. I have my brother married an Italian woman, and their kids are bilingual, so they both speak fluently Italian and English. And I remember when they're young, they would be talking with me, and they'd be talking to each other, two boys talking to each other, and then talking to me, and they turn to me and talk to me in Italian, and then all of a sudden they go, "Oh yeah, he doesn't speak Italian," so they switch to English. But just the idea to be the ability to think in a different language, I would really love to be able to do that. I've tried a couple of times. It's really hard to learn another language when you're my age.
I think it's hard to learn another language at any age, but so what do you do when you're not working, Dave?
Well, I'm not. I'm working most of the time. So I used to play football, but COVID kind of shut that down, which
I'll say
it causes me no amount of sorrow. I dearly miss it. So there's that. Music. I play guitar. I dabble in keyboards, and I'm trying to record some stuff. So so that's I read fiction and movies and hang out with my GF.
yeah, and so tell me. I mean, I can obviously see that you collect guitars. Is there something else that you collect?
I used to collect the phrase "yes, yes, I know, shut up" in different languages. So I'm trying. I CCO say cállate is Spanish. Ano Dersh Ubu is Czech, I think, or Slovak. I can't remember, but I had a bunch of them that I was collecting, but I stopped collecting a couple of years ago, so I've forgotten how those were. But yeah, guitars.
That's pretty arcane, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
The reason I should explain why I collected, because I found it, I don't know, long ago, I thought it was very, very, very amusing to be able to insult somebody in a different language.
Definitely, definitely. That was pretty kind the way you did it. I mean,
Yeah.
I can think of much more insulting ways to do it, and I know a few of those. So, what's the most recent thing you learned? New thing.
Oh, that's a good one. I learned that America is not immune to authoritarianism.
Horrifying.
I mean, we
as
can
that
stop
is.
there. We can stop there, because that's just too depressing. But that's what came to mind.
I know it's never far from mine these days.
Yeah.
What would you like people to know about you as they meet you? How would you like people to understand you?
I think so. The one question I always wanted to ask people in interviews, but was too unfair to ask, is that if you had 9 lives, how would you spend them? Because I think that kind of what I'd like people to know is that I'm very curious. If I had 9 lives, I could spend them in many different ways. So that's probably the biggest thing is I'm an omnivar for learning.
You also, don't you play games too? Aren't you a gamer?
Oh, video games.
Yeah.
Yeah, not in a long time. It's probably been in a year or more that I actually played a video game.
No
So,
time.
but yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I do like them. I like them as a immersive entertainment kind of thing. But I got into them because I saw them as another communications vehicle. When I saw that Xbox Live came out and people were talking and gaming at the same time, like that's another communications channel I need to learn.
Absolutely. That one is an astonishing one. You know,
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, isn't there a whole channel for that now, Twitch?
Twitch, yeah.
Yeah. And people get rich on it. So do you have a pro tip for us?
Yes. So this is a podcasting tip that we may have talked about. Well, I know you and I talked about it because you tell me not to do it all the time. But I've been noticing that I've been producing a couple of podcasts, and I've been noticing some of the guests when they are making a point, they're gesticulating. Sometimes they're hitting the desk, and that that comes through the microphone loud and
Every
clear.
time.
My thing is not necessarily gesticulating and hitting the desk. I often just inadvertently start fiddling with the microphone while I'm talking
I do know that.
and moving the microphone. You can hear that coming through. Like, I don't know if that's.
Oh, we hear it. So,
And then the other thing is typing on the keyboards while you're recording a podcast or video
not
conferencing or
using
whatever.
the mute button. Um,
Yeah.
so, what, oh, I just lost my place here. When was the last time something surprised you?
Ah, great question. The last surprise is when you realize that nothing surprises you anymore.
Uh-oh.
That's that's a poem by Richard Brautigan. It's one of my favorite poems.
That's that. Wow. You know, what is your advice now for young people who are coming into this field? What would you tell them?
So while we talked about how young people coming in usually have to pick a channel and go deep and learn everything about it, and that's probably inevitable. But I would say that it is insanely important, I think, to be really successful in this type of in strategic communications writ large, is to have a broad knowledge base, to a liberal arts education. I think I got an English degree, and for the longest time I was like hitting my head against the wall. Why did I do that? Why didn't I get a business degree or everything? Because it did not matter for what getting me a job or anything. But in this line of work now, it has paid dividends in spades. It's understanding what a story looks like, understanding a story arc, empathy, putting yourself in the place of the characters in the book. Just all those different things play into exactly what the skills you need to be an effective communicator.
No, all those things are absolutely true. And then I think that this is probably my last question for you, but what's the most striking change since you started in your career in marketing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is when what I was excited about at the beginning of my career was the level playing field of communications, where all of a sudden with the internet, anybody had a megaphone essentially, or you could create an audience, you could reach an audience without going through a mediator to find an audience. That is still a remarkable thing about the internet, but it went from an idealistic thing, many of us were very idealistic about it, to what it is now, which is a threat in many ways to democracy. So the harnessing of these technologies by bad actors is the most striking thing. And now, as communicators, we need to deal with hacking attacks. We need to deal with misinformation campaigns. We need to deal with fake content. We need to deal with bad actors. And that's something that is very sad.
Yeah, I hate to end it on a sad note,
Yeah,
but that's all really, really true. And
yeah.
I'm really glad we got to spend this time together. There was a lot of things that I did not know about your background, even though we've been doing this now for what, 8 years.
Yeah.
So this will be on the Beyond Social Media Show YouTube channel, on our blog, beyondsocialmediashow.com. And of course, everywhere you get your podcast, you will find this interview there. We will be back next week. And if you want to find us and you forget what I just told you, just look for Beyond Social Media Show. We are pretty much everywhere. And we're really glad that you were able to join us today. And thanks, Dave. That was really fun.
Thanks, BL. That was fun.
Okay.